My tomatoes are winding down, and I'm okay with that. I've been blessed this year with a really big bounty of tomatoes, and I'm so happy. But I'm getting kind of overwhelmed with harvesting, processing. I'm kind of hitting that critical mass where I feel like I have enough of things to do something with. Not a crazy amount. Some people put up videos where they do 200 jars or whatever. I don't have that. But I've got enough to make me feel like I've attained something this year. I'm out here this morning picking some of these that are turning red or getting almost red, and I'm going to add them to my collection in the kitchen. And then what I do with them is pretty simple after that. I'll start canning later, but right now I just have an easy way I process things when I bring them in the house as far as tomatoes go. Very easy. Let me show you what I do. You know how you want to come inside and go ahead and do the task that you had on your mind, but when you have a whole menagerie of vegetables in this basket, you have to go ahead and process them first. So I need to put a few things here, there, and yonder, and then I'll get back to my tomatoes. Remember this shelf that I built about a year ago? It is a workhorse. It's in my dining room, and I use it for all different kinds of things. This time of year, I use it to store vegetables on and seeds. I put grow lights under these shelves, and I actually use this little shelf unit to start all my plants that I start. And so it does that, but also now the bottom of it is being used to put all kind of winter squash. It's starting to spill over to the next shelf too. This is on the north side of my house, so it doesn't get a lot of direct light, and I can control what it does get with a curtain. But for right now, it makes an excellent spot to put my winter squash, and it stores well here. And this top shelf is where I put a lot of my seeds. When I walk in with my dried pods, I have little bowls designated for the different beans, and I put the pods in there. And right now, I'm going to be digging out a lot of pods that I had in my pocket. My Appalachian beans are really drying up right now, and I'm able to harvest a lot of the little pods. And I walk around my yard all the time with bean pods in my pocket. Some people do that with eggs because they have chickens. Well, I don't have chickens, but I do walk around with a lot of dried up pods in my pocket. And I try to keep all this separate because I'm really wanting to save seeds and keep them all separated. I'm going to go out there in a little while and do my regular green pole beans. But for right now, this morning, all I got done was the Appalachian and the bush beans and the dried pole beans. Before I can get to my tomatoes, I need to go ahead and take all of these squash and zucchini and cucumbers out of this basket. I've been making some zucchini pickles out of the Ball cookbook, so that gives me something to do with a lot of this, and I've been kind of mixing them and making zucchini and cucumber pickles as a mixture, and they come out really good. They taste wonderful. All that was left in the basket was a few little purple beans that I have, some cherry tomatoes, and then I had just one tomatillo and one little white eggplant. I just went ahead and harvested it. I might fry it tonight for supper. It's the only one on the bush. Then I had a little array of peppers from different plants, and that's it. Now on to the tomatoes. That's what we're here for. Here's what I got just today that was in that blue basket, just today. And I get this here lately about every day. So I have to keep them moving. I have to have a little process to keep these tomatoes moving. Now, when I harvest tomatoes, I go ahead and harvest them when they're just starting to kind of blush. Some of them get a little more red because I miss them one day and I'll come back and get them the next. But when they first start to blush, that's when I go ahead and grab them. Now, the black tomatoes, this is a black Seaman tomato. They look a little different as they're starting to turn red because they really don't turn red. They'll turn more of a high blush peach, or they'll turn a copper color a lot of times. Depends on which variety you have. But they look a little different. So you can kind of harvest these earlier than you think they should. A lot of times they retain their green shoulders at the top. This is a Naya Goose tomato here. And look how green these shoulders are. You might be tempted not to pick that yet, but it's almost ripe. It's almost completely ripe. It'll turn a little more copper. The little copper color will start coming up this tomato, and it's ready to go. So you have to be really careful with the black tomatoes because they sometimes never lose those green shoulders. And you have to kind of know when to go ahead and harvest them. But they're delicious. They're my favorite tomatoes, and I would grow these over any red tomato any day of the week. I love them that much. The basic process I use is that I store my tomatoes in Ziplocs in the freezer until I'm ready to process them. And I have a little system. They go up on my windowsill above my kitchen sink. Thank goodness I have a big window because I put my tomatoes up here. It's kind of a little process. It's a little in and out process that I use all the time. But it just works for me. I put them up into this window until I see that they're ripe and they're ready to go in the freezer, and I rotate them. I'll move them around. I check them every day. I make sure which ones are ready and which ones or need to sit there another day or so. And then they all move through the system. So what I'm fixing to do today is go ahead and pick out the ones that are ready to go in my Ziplocs, and I'm going to go ahead and process those and get them ready for the Ziplocs. I look at each tomato, big and small. When they start feeling a little heavy, you know they're getting ripe. When you start to be able to kind of squeeze the sides and it has that little push to the side, where they feel squeezy, you know they're getting ripe. This isn't scientific. This is just me. And you have to know your varieties too, because some tomatoes don't get bright red. Some tomatoes stay an orangey color or yellow color. So you have to know your tomatoes and you have to know that feel of them to know if they're ripe. But it's pretty common sense. And I do this to every tomato on the window. If they're obviously green, I don't. But I'll pick up every one of them that I think is close and I go through them. This is an example of a black tomato that is ready to go in the freezer. Though it's green at the top, it's really copper at the bottom, it's squishy, it is fully ripe. It needs to go in the freezer today. And these are the tomatoes that I decided are ready to go into the Ziplocs. I'm fixing to start preparing the tops of those to do that. But I wanted to show you kind of how my little system works. I went ahead and went through all the tomatoes and I moved all of them down to the left-hand side of my windowsill. And then the right-hand side is now freed up. And I'll go ahead and fill that with all the tomatoes I brought in the house today. And they'll sit there for the next few days until they're ready for the Ziplocs. That's my process in a nutshell. That's how I do it. Now let me show you how I actually get the tomatoes ready to put in the Ziploc bags. For some of the larger tomatoes, I go ahead and core out the top of it. I go ahead and take my knife and just core out that top of it. And then what I do is I put a little X on the tomatoes. On big or small, I put a little X. To me, this helps the skin kind of peel off easier when you go to peel that skin off. And it's something you have to just experiment and learn. But I put them into the Ziplocs after this. And I wanted to emphasize that when you freeze your tomatoes before you process them, it does make that skin fall off easier. That has been my experience. I've also heard other homesteaders say the same thing. So that's why I do this process. I don't worry about hurrying up and making tomatoes in my canner with fresh tomatoes. I like to freeze them because they process easier. On the smaller tomatoes, all I really do is just take the little green off the top, and then I go ahead and use my knife and cut the little X. That's it for some of them that just have that little top part. But for the bigger ones, I go ahead and core them. And obviously, if you have some bad spots on the top of your tomatoes, get those off. I mean, nobody wants to can these rotten spots and worm spots or anything. So I go ahead and just take those off and just go ahead and core the whole top of that tomato out. And then, of course, I'll go ahead and just do my little X on it after that. I'm going to do the rest of the basket, and then they're going to go in the freezer. It's a pretty easy job, nothing to it. My freezer is filling up fast. I have a bunch of bags of squash in here. I just process the squash, put it in Ziplocs until I'm ready to cook with it, either fresh or in a casserole. And now I'm adding my tomatoes to the freezer. I've got about 4-gallon bags so far. And like I said, I have many more to come, which I'm grateful for. But it is a process to get all this done and to find freezer space for it. But the good thing is, on the back end of all this, I can decide when I'm ready to process my tomatoes. I can decide when I'm ready to take them out. I can put them into the boiling water frozen, not a big deal. and I can get them going, and those skins will fall off so easy, and I can get them going when I'm ready. So tomatoes, while I have a lot of them, they're actually one of the easiest things to deal with. Well, this is how I deal with my tomatoes. I'd be curious to know how you deal with yours. Put some messages down in the comments. I'd appreciate learning how everybody handles their harvest of tomatoes. This is Lainey from Hilltop Home Place. Thank y'all for joining me today for this. This is a little respite and watching how I process my tomatoes. I hope your gardens are doing great. Y'all have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.